They told you that you are a name, a body, a story moving through time. They told you that you must make something of yourself, improve yourself, find yourself. They gave you mirrors and medals and maps to follow, and when you still felt lost, they said, try harder. And so you did. But in quiet hours, when the distractions dim and the soft machinery of the mind slows, you may have heard it. The fracture beneath the surface. The strange echo of a question that cannot be answered with words. What is this self you were taught to protect? There is something deeply cruel in the way the world teaches us to exist. It tells you that you are a thing, a noun, an object with edges. As if life were a possession you carry. As if the soul were some crystal orb you might polish, decorate, and present at the altar of social approval. But what if that's the first lie? What if you are not a thing, but a process? Not a statue, but a wave? Alan Watts did not speak to flatter or to sell a dream. He looked directly into the face of the illusion and smiled. Because the illusion was the joke. A divine prank played upon consciousness. We are not observers trapped inside flesh. We are the flesh dreaming of observation. We are the thoughts pretending to be a thinker. The sensation of separateness, this I, this me, this story, is not reality. It is theater. And yet, how convincing it feels. The daily performance of personhood. The rituals of ambition, shame, identity. Each role rehearsed since childhood. Each mask becoming a second skin. And so we live in mirrors. We shape ourselves by the reflections in other people's eyes. But what happens when the mirrors crack? When the face you wear begins to slip? There is a peculiar terror that arises when the illusion begins to break. It is not the fear of death, but the fear of never having existed at all. Not as you believed. Not as the isolated ghost behind your eyes. What said it clearly? The self you cling to is a social construct, a linguistic convenience, a phantom. And to see through it is to fall beautifully, terrifyingly into the truth. But the truth is not what you were promised. There is no soul perched like a passenger inside the machine of your body. No captain at the helm. The more you look for the one who is looking, the more you vanish into smoke. Try to hold the I in your hand, and you will grasp only air. Because what you are cannot be grasped. You are not inside the universe. You are of it. You are not the actor upon the stage. You are the stage itself, the lights, the script, the thunderous silence before the first word is spoken. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean pretending to be a drop. This is not a metaphor. It is the pulse of reality stripped of illusion. The tragedy is that we resist it. We spend our lives reinforcing walls that were never real. We feel alone in a crowd of billions, isolated inside the prison of our name. And in that loneliness, we build more walls. Identity becomes armor. Opinion becomes territory. Desire becomes warfare. The ego, terrified of its own non-existence, clings tighter. It creates problems so it can survive solving them. But what if you stopped fighting? What if the self you're trying to protect does not need protection? Because it was never there to begin with. When Watts spoke of the taboo against knowing who you are, he wasn't pointing to esoteric mystery. He was gesturing towards something closer than breath, more intimate than thought. A truth so obvious that it becomes invisible. You are not the thinker of your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts appear. You are not the doer of actions. You are the unfolding of action itself. You are not someone having an experience. You are experience. To realize this is not to become enlightened. It is to die before you die. To watch the scaffolding of the self crumble, not with horror, but with reverence. Like snow melting into water. Like silence returning after the music ends. There is no arrival here. No grand revelation waiting at the summit. Just a subtle, quiet undoing. An unraveling of the belief that you are what you think. And in that unraveling, a strange freedom. Not the freedom of choice or achievement, but the freedom of being nothing, and therefore everything. The freedom of no longer needing to prove, to perform, to protect. The freedom of falling into your own absence and discovering that what falls was never separate to begin with. This is not a philosophy for the proud or the afraid. It is not a message that comforts the ego. It is a knife that cuts through illusion. A whisper that says, you were never alone, because you were never apart. The self is a story the universe tells itself and forgets. Now be still and listen. You wake each morning inside a name that does not feel like your own. You rise in a body that aches with the weight of memory. The mirror smiles back with the face you've memorized, but somewhere behind the eyes, something watches. Not judging, not speaking, just watching, silently, as if waiting for you to remember. And yet, you forget again. You scroll, you dress, you perform. The rituals begin. You are the employee, the lover, the sibling, the friend. You speak as if the words are yours. You nod as if belief is natural. But beneath the gestures, beneath even the thoughts, there is only one question, buried like an ancient stone beneath the surface of a still lake. Who is living this life? We are taught to fear the silence between the waves, to distract ourselves from the gaps in our reflection. But what's new that in those gaps lies something more real than the names we cling to? He called it the burden of separateness, the illusion that you are a stranger among strangers, a lone spark cast into a cold and indifferent void. It is not pain that breaks us, it is alienation. To believe oneself a lonely observer, a ghost haunting a collapsing world, is the most intimate kind of suffering. You look at the stars and feel small. You look at the dying and feel afraid. You hear a child laugh, and something in you hurts. Not because life is tragic, but because you feel cut off from it. As if joy, beauty, meaning are things that happen out there, and you are stuck in here. But there is no out there. There never was. That wall you built to protect your identity, that fragile fortress of preferences, traumas, and opinions, is not a boundary. It is a blindfold. And the longer you wear it, the more the world becomes a memory of something you never touched. We were not born this way. The child knows. The newborn does not look at the sky and say mine or not mine. It does not divide the world into names and categories. It moves with the wind and weeps with hunger. It is what it feels. It does not watch, it is. And then, slowly, we are taught to shrink. We are taught to define. We are taught that the self is something we must carry, polish, and defend. And with each lesson, we disappear. To become a person in this world is to die to what you truly are. Not once, but every day. A slow, acceptable death. The kind with applause, with titles, with pension plans. But inside something decays. The soul does not scream. It erodes. Watts did not offer an escape. He offered a mirror. And in that mirror, there is no one staring back. Just movement, sound, light on water. A dance with no dancer. A voice with no speaker. This is not a metaphor. This is the wound of awakening. You are not who you think you are. And the self knows it. It clings tighter when it senses the truth approaching. It becomes louder, more dramatic, more possessive. It hungers for attention, validation, distraction. It becomes jealous, territorial, anxious. Because it knows that if you look too closely, it will dissolve. Not in some cataclysmic event, but gently, like a shadow at noon. And so we keep running. We fall in love with identities. We argue as if we are defending our life, when we are only defending a costume. We chase pleasure not because we are hungry, but because we are terrified of being still. We wrap ourselves in entertainment, in ideology, in productivity. Not because they fulfill, but because they numb the ache of a question we cannot answer. Who am I, if not this? But the real question is more dangerous still. Who am I without the need to be someone? The ego cannot answer this. It will call it nonsense. It will scream for meaning, for structure, for control. But the heart, the quiet thing behind the noise, has always known. You are not the riverbank. You are the water. You are not the voice. You are the listening. You are not the self. You are the space it arises in. This is not comfort. It is collapse. Because to see it clearly is to lose your story. Your wounds no longer define you. Your ambitions no longer justify you. Your fears are revealed to be smoke. And your name becomes an echo in the wind. Do not resist this collapse. Let it come. Let the weight of the illusion fall away. Let the armor crack. Let the mask slip. And underneath all that pretending, you will find not emptiness, but presence. Not absence, but everything. Because what you are does not need to be defended. It does not need to be improved, justified, or fixed. It was never broken. It was never separate. It was always here, watching, waiting for the moment you stopped running. Now breathe, not as someone, just as being. There is a quiet violence in the way we live, a spiritual erosion that passes unnoticed because it wears a smile. We call it identity. We call it success. But it is no different than a shadow that grows thicker with each light we forget to follow. We have built a world on the assumption of separateness. Cities of concrete and ego. Nations forged in the myth of difference. Economies carved from the bones of comparison. A global cathedral dedicated not to truth, but to image. And each morning, billions rise to worship at its altar. This is the Church of the Mask, and its sermons are endless. They echo through glowing screens and corporate slogans, through polished influencers and curated belief systems. You must brand yourself, shape yourself, sell yourself. Do not look inward, look better. Be more, achieve more, consume more. Then you will matter. Then you will exist. But what happens when the performance never ends? When the mask becomes tighter than the skin? Alan Watts warned us, not of dystopias fueled by surveillance, but of a subtler tyranny, the worship of the persona, the reduction of the soul to a marketable identity. He saw the danger in mistaking the map for the terrain, the profile for the presence, the echo for the voice. And now, everywhere, we see the cost. We live among ghosts, tethered to avatars, addicted to attention, terrified of being unseen. We mistake validation for intimacy, exposure for connection. We touch without feeling. We speak without silence. And in this great hall of mirrors, we forget there was ever a window. Each platform becomes a pulpit, each post a prayer. But the God we reach for has no face, no warmth, no return. It only asks for more. More of your time, your mind, your becoming, never your being. And so we become fragmented, hypervisible and deeply unknown. Performers in our own lives, actors without rest. We don't know how to sit in a room without broadcasting it, how to breathe without branding it. The moment becomes a draft. The self becomes a feed. And all the while, something sacred dissolves unnoticed. The space where we once simply were. But why do we cling to the mask? Why is the illusion of separateness so seductive? Because it gives us boundaries. It tells us where we end and the world begins. It grants us names to hold and fears to fight. The mask feels safe. It defines us. But the price of that safety is exile from the depth we came from the mystery we are. To live in the mask is to forget the ocean and worship the wave. But what happens when the wave breaks? Beneath the smiles and filters, depression. Beneath the curated joy, dissociation. Anxiety blooms not from what is real, but from what must be maintained. The self becomes a castle built on sand, and we guard it with sleepless vigilance. Because if we stop pretending, we fall. And so we don't stop. We scroll. We market. We optimize. Even our spiritual quests become extensions of the mask. We turn awakening into content, inner peace into a product line. Mindfulness becomes a strategy. The ego rebrands itself as spiritual and grows stronger still. But real awakening is not marketable. It cannot be monetized. It is not glamorous. It is disintegration, the unraveling of all you thought you were, the death of every certainty. It is falling into the space between roles, where the mask cracks and the wind whispers a name you had forgotten you once knew. What's called this freedom? But not the kind sold in ads, not the kind found in travel brochures or vision boards. It is the freedom of nothing to prove, of no one to be, the freedom of not knowing, of not having, of simply existing, like rain, like flame, like breath without a mouth. And it terrifies us, because we have forgotten how to be naked, naked in thought, in emotion, in presence. And so we dress ourselves endlessly, in ideas, in opinions, in aesthetics, in causes. But the body still remembers. The heart still remembers. The silence beneath the noise still trembles with a truth we cannot name, but cannot escape. That we were never just this. That we were never alone. That the self was never separate. Look around. The mask is cracking. The system is groaning. The culture of performance is beginning to suffocate under its own weight. We see it in the burnout, in the loneliness, in the silent despair of those who have everything and still wake up aching, not for more, but for less. less pretending, less fragmentation, less distance from whatever it is that sings behind the noise. Watts did not preach. He pointed. He did not give answers. He unmasked the question. And the question remains. What are you when no one is watching? What remains when you put the mask down, not with fear, but with reverence? What lives in the silence after the applause fades? We have all been actors in a play we did not write. But the stage is empty now. The spotlight flickers. The curtain trembles. And in the wings, the world waits not for your performance, but for your presence. Will you come? Or will the mask take the final bow? It doesn't happen like thunder. There is no explosion, no grand declaration. No one applauds. No light breaks through the clouds. Liberation, when it begins, sounds more like forgetting than discovering. Like silence seeping into a room that's always been too loud. Like the first breath after a lifetime of holding it in. You don't even notice it at first. You just stop answering as quickly. You stop needing to explain. The performance begins to feel heavy. And the mask, once weightless, starts to itch. You find yourself alone, maybe in the dark, maybe at a red light, maybe in the middle of a conversation, and something flickers. A soft disobedience in your chest. A refusal so gentle it cannot be named. You don't rise. You don't run. You just don't continue. That is how the rebellion begins. Not in fire, but in the quiet erosion of pretense. A gaze that no longer seeks approval. A smile that does not need to be understood. A word left unsaid because the silence feels more honest. It is not apathy. It is not detachment. It is presence, raw, still, and strangely unfamiliar. And it feels like death. But it is not death. It is the self beginning to soften. The walls beginning to melt. It is the first tear in the fabric of identity. And through that tear, light bleeds in, not harsh, but ancient. As if it had always been there, waiting to be let in. Something in you remembers. Not a fact. Not a teaching. A feeling. A gravity pulling you inward, downward, homeward. Not toward a goal. Not toward a better version of yourself. But away from becoming altogether. There is no need to be more. There is only the need to be. But we are not trained to sit in this. We are trained to adjust the mask. To repair the performance. To chase new achievements, new validations, new disguises. And so even the early signs of awakening feel wrong. Like failure. Like madness. But that's because the self you've been trained to protect is beginning to lose control. And it will not go quietly. It will flood you with doubt. With nostalgia for certainty. It will whisper that something is being lost. That something must be fixed. That you are falling behind. But you are not falling behind. You are falling away. From the scaffolding of identity. From the prison of becoming. And as terrifying as that sounds, somewhere deeper, it feels right. It feels inevitable. It feels like returning to something you had no name for as a child, but felt in every leaf, every breeze, every breathless laugh before the world told you who you were supposed to be. There is a sacred exhaustion in you now. Not the kind that sleep cures. The kind that comes from years of pretending. And with that exhaustion comes softness. A slowing down. You begin to move like water. You begin to look without labeling. To listen without preparing your next sentence. You begin to feel not for meaning, but for aliveness. You begin to live as if you were not someone, but something. The hum behind the sound. The stillness beneath the thought. The pulse of being before the name. And it hurts. Because you begin to see what the mask has cost you. The moments you missed. The connections that felt real but were only echoes. The nights you stared into a screen, longing to be seen, while hiding everything that mattered. You see how the world rewards the costume, and how long you wore it just to be loved. But now, you are tired of tricks. You are tired of performing death to receive counterfeit life. And so you sit, and so you breathe, and so you begin to let go. Not all at once, not forever, but enough. Enough to feel the air against your skin without needing to name it. Enough to hear the silence as music. Enough to stand at the edge of your story and choose not to leap forward, but to step back. To become space. Not for answers, but for the possibility of being unguarded. Of being unmade. And maybe, just maybe, of being whole. You are not awakening to something new. You are remembering what never left. Not a self, not a path, but a presence. A flame in the dark that asks nothing of you except that you see it, not with your eyes, but with your being. This is the gentle collapse, the soft ending of a long dream. Do not resist it. Let it fall. Let it fall. Let it fall. It happens like dusk, quietly, without consent. You don't plan to see it. You don't seek it out. You simply look up one day, and the sky inside you has changed. The colors are not what they were. The familiar shapes no longer hold. The things you believed would always guide you crack. And what spills out is silence. Not the absence of sound. The presence of what's real. This is where the beautiful lie begins to fall apart. The lie that you were a fixed shape. A name carved in stone. A single thread separate from the weave. The lie that said meaning is something you chased like a dog chasing headlights. The lie that told you to build, to strive, to perform, so that one day you might finally be enough. Enough for who? Enough for what? You begin to notice how deep the illusion ran. It wasn't just in the image you built. It was in the voice you used to talk to yourself. The way you flinched from stillness. The way you needed someone watching to believe you were real. Even your dreams weren't yours. They were handed to you like costumes in a play, scripted and approved. But now the script tastes like dust, and the applause means nothing. You begin to see how much of your life was lived from the outside in. How much of your truth was censored before it could even take shape. How often you chose comfort over authenticity. How the love you gave was laced with performance, and the love you received came only when you played the role. No one taught you how to just be. They taught you how to win, how to please, how to fit the shape the world demanded. But to exist raw, unguarded, and unpolished, that was never safe. And so you forgot. You forgot how to rest in yourself without needing to be seen. You forgot how to trust your own silence. You forgot how to feel without explaining. You became what they needed, what they celebrated, what they envied. And somewhere in that long imitation, the real began to fade. Until now. Because now, something in you can no longer pretend. Something in you is breaking. Not like glass, but like ice in spring. Slowly, inevitably, a warmth returns to your blood. A grief without name. A knowing without thought. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It simply is. You can't go back. You try. You reach for the old mask, the old rhythm, the old voice. But they no longer fit. They no longer respond. You wear them, but they sag. You speak them, but they echo. And in this collapse, a strange mercy arrives. You are no longer convincing. And that is your freedom. This is the sacred unraveling. The skin shedding itself. The name forgetting its letters. And all the while, the world goes on as if nothing has changed. Traffic hums. Screens glow. People smile and perform. But you are no longer among them. You are there, but not inside. You are watching, breathing, aching from someplace deeper. Not above, not below, just behind the veil. And in that distance, you begin to feel everything. Not numbed, not filtered. Everything. Joy without a reason. Grief without a trigger. Laughter that doesn't ask permission. You feel your aliveness in its totality, not just the curated version. And it is overwhelming. Because to feel without armor is to remember the cost of numbness. Every act of self-abandonment. Every silence you swallowed. Every truth you edited into something polite. They come back now not as blame, but as clarity. You see it all. And you forgive yourself. Not with words. With breath. With stillness. With tears that do not explain themselves. And you grieve, not for what was done, but for what was unlived. For the parts of you that sat in the dark, waiting for the day you'd choose truth over safety, depth over applause, presence over polish. And in that grief, something opens. Not a door, not a path, just space. A vastness behind the chest. A quiet where the need once screamed. You thought freedom would feel like fire, like flight, but it feels like letting go of the rope. It feels like falling, not into danger, but into what has always held you. Into the mystery that does not ask you to be anything but what you are, right now, breathing, breaking, becoming. This is not the end. It is not a new chapter. It is the space between pages, where nothing is written, but everything is felt. And in that space, You are no longer a self, no longer a seeker. You are just here, raw, real, unfinished, alive. The beautiful lie has fallen apart, and underneath it, there is only this. There is a point where words no longer follow, where thought itself slows, as if ashamed to speak over what can only be felt. The questions remain, but they loosen their grip. The need to understand softens. You stop searching for meaning and begin to live as the space that makes meaning possible. This is not enlightenment. This is not transcendence. This is the moment the tide recedes, and you are left on the shore with nothing but your breath and the salt in your blood. And for the first time, it is enough. You sit in the body that once felt foreign, and it no longer feels like a cage. Not because you've escaped it, but because you no longer confuse it with who you are. The edges blur. The mind rests. You are not inside the world. The world is inside you. A ripple, unfolding. A sky moves through your chest. The pulse of existence continues, not as something you observe, but as something you are. Every breeze is your breath. Every shadow, your silence. The world is no longer separate. It never was. But now, you remember. The forgetting is over. And in this remembering, there is no effort. Just being. No journey to complete. Just presence. The self, that old trickster, sits quietly now. Like an actor after the curtain falls. It has played its part. It will return. It always does. But for now, it has no lines to say. No audience to please. Only the echo of a role that no longer holds power. And behind it, beneath it, beyond it, a vast, unnameable stillness. You will not live here forever. You will return to movement, to voice, to doing, to the beautiful, clumsy rituals of human life. But something will be different. Not visible, not measurable, just quieter, more open. You will walk not ahead of yourself, not behind, but with your breath, with your shadow, with the world. And this witness is enough. There will be sorrow again, noise again. The illusion will rebuild itself with polished hands. The name will harden once more. But now, you will know. You will carry a silence deeper than confusion, a clarity that doesn't need to prove itself. And sometimes, when the sky turns a certain color, when a stranger laughs just right, when you touch something you used to take for granted, you will feel it again. That presence, that absence of resistance, that unbearable lightness of simply being. And it will feel like love. Not the love sold in poems or promises, but the original love, the love of life for itself, the love of the wind for the trees it bends, the love of space for the stars it holds. You will not need to name it. You will not need to keep it. You will not need to tell anyone, because it is not something you have. It is what you are. And it was always here, waiting, watching, whispering through every breath you thought was yours. You return, then, not as someone new, but as someone who remembers what was never lost. And the remembering is quiet. It hums in the bones. It waits in the gaze. It settles behind the heart, where the world and the self kiss without separation. This is not a triumph. This is not an answer. This is not a solution. This is the gentle exhale after the storm. The warmth that lingers when the fire burns low. The soft hush of the soul realizing it was never broken. Only disguised. Only delayed. Only dreaming. And now, the dream thins. The veil lifts. The mirror stops asking. And all that remains is this breath, this moment, this life. Yours and not yours. A wave cresting, then falling back into the ocean it never left.